An Iranian missile boat just fired at USS Farragut. One missile, close range, direct bearing. The destroyer had 11 seconds before the weapon reached minimum Phalanx engagement range. Welcome to Navy Powerline, where we break down the naval operations that are shaping the balance of global power. What you are about to hear is a reconstruction based on documented IRGCN missile boat operations, U.S. Navy destroyer defensive protocols, and Fifth Fleet tactical assessments of the Eastern Hormuz approach threat environment. The IRGCN operates a fleet of fast missile boats, specifically the Thondor class and C-14 catamaran hull variants, that carry C-801 and C-802 anti-ship missiles and are capable of hiding in the cluttered radar environment of the Strait's commercial traffic until they are close enough to fire with minimal warning time. The eastern approach to the Strait of Hormuz is different from the western corridor. Where the western approach is relatively open water, the eastern end is a maze of commercial traffic. Tankers, container ships, bulk carriers transiting in both directions, mixed in with fishing vessels and small local craft from both the Omani and Iranian coastlines. For a destroyer conducting freedom of navigation operations in that environment, every contact is a potential threat, and every contact also looks like a commercial vessel until it isn't. This is the environment the IRGCN designed its missile boat doctrine to exploit. At 7:08 a.m., USS Farragut, an Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer, was transiting eastbound through the separation scheme 22 nautical miles west of the Strait of Hormuz's eastern exit. Surrounding the destroyer in the shipping lane were 14 commercial vessels of various sizes. The radar picture was dense. The contacts were numerous. The threat library categorization running in the Combat Information Center had flagged 12 of the 14 commercial contacts as low threat, and 2 as requiring continued monitoring based on their approach angles. Neither of the 2 flagged contacts was the actual threat. The missile boat, a C-14 catamaran hull, approximately 23 meters in length, with a displacement of roughly 16 tons, had been following the destroyer at a distance of approximately 6,400 meters for the previous 22 minutes. It had been hiding in the radar clutter of a larger container ship, staying in the zone where the container ship's bulk created a reflection shadow in the destroyer's radar. The C-14's own radar cross-section is small, smaller than a standard fishing boat at certain aspect angles. The destroyer's sensor operators had not identified the contact. At 7:31 a.m., the C-14 began accelerating. It separated from the container ship's shadow and began closing the distance on USS Farragut on an overtaking bearing. The change in the contact's behavior, acceleration, course adjustment toward the destroyer, was logged by the automated track management system and flagged as a developing contact. The watch officer reviewed the flag at 7:33 a.m. The contact was accelerating, but its heading was not yet directly toward Farragut. It could be a vessel clearing the separation scheme to the north. It could be a fast local craft moving to a different traffic lane. The watch officer applied the rule of thumb that has guided this exact judgment call in the Gulf for 30 years. If it hasn't done something unambiguously hostile, it's a civilian vessel until proven otherwise. He maintained the watch. He did not go to general quarters. At 7:38 a.m., the C-14 completed its acceleration run and was now making approximately 36 knots on a bearing directly toward USS Farragut. Distance, 9,200 meters. The automated track system elevated the contact to high priority alert. The watch officer called general quarters at 7:38:45. The time from the contact's first anomalous behavior to general quarters, 5 minutes and 45 seconds. In those 5 minutes and 45 seconds, the C-14 had covered 5,000 meters toward the ship. At 7:39 and 12 seconds, the Combat Information Center was manned. The tactical action officer reviewed the contact picture in approximately 40 seconds and identified the C-14 as a probable IRGCN missile boat. The hull shape, speed, and approach profile were consistent with the Thondor/C-14 family documented in the ship's threat files. He recommended weapons free to the commanding officer at 7:39:54. Under the rules of engagement in the Eastern Hormuz approach, a small, fast vessel on a direct intercept course at high speed, classified as a probable military contact, could be engaged preemptively if the ship's commander assessed imminent threat. The standard applied was, if the vessel reaches 4,500 meters without altering course, fire warning shots. If it continues past 3,500 meters, fire to destroy. The C-14 was at 7,400 meters, closing at 36 knots. He had approximately 41 seconds before it reached the 4,500-meter warning shot threshold. He authorized warning shots at 7:40 and 1 second. The Mk-38 chain gun on the port side fired a burst across the C-14's bow at 7:40:09. Approximately 200 rounds of 25 millimeters at a point 500 meters ahead of the boat's current track. The C-14 did not alter course. At 7:40:22, the boat reached 5,200 meters, still closing, still directly toward Farragut. The Mk-38 began tracking the C-14 at 7:40:30. At 5,000 meters, a 25 millimeter round will penetrate the hull of a small vessel, damage its propulsion, and if it hits the right point, detonate its fuel. The gun crew was tracking and building a firing solution. The C-14 fired 7:40:41 a.m. The missile, an assessment later confirmed as a C-801 anti-ship missile, subsonic, sea-skimming, with a range of 40 kilometers and a 165-kilogram warhead, left the C-14's launch rail at a range of 4,800 meters. Warning shots had not been enough. The missile was flying at approximately 250 meters per second. At 4,800 meters, that gave USS Farragut's defenses 19 seconds before impact. The Phalanx CIWS, the ship's last resort close-in weapon system, a radar-guided 20mm Gatling cannon firing 4,500 rounds per minute, is designed to engage exactly this threat. It operates in fully automatic mode when the ship is at battle stations. It does not wait for a human command. The moment its tracking radar acquires a hostile inbound contact, it fires. At 7:40:46, the Phalanx acquired the inbound C-801. At 7:40:49, the Phalanx opened fire. The engagement took approximately 1.4 seconds of continuous firing, at 4,500 rounds per minute. That is approximately 105 rounds. The 20mm tungsten penetrator rounds intersected the C-801's flight path at approximately 900 meters range from USS Farragut. The missile detonated in flight. The warhead did not achieve full detonation. The fuse was disrupted before arming was complete. The explosion was a partial deflagration rather than a full warhead burst. But partial was not nothing. The blast and fragmentation reached USS Farragut's port side at approximately 750 meters, beyond the expected fragmentation radius for a full C-801 warhead, but within the radius of the degraded detonation. A fragment approximately 18 centimeters long and 4 centimeters wide penetrated the ship's superstructure above the waterline. It passed through an electronics equipment compartment and struck a fire control console, destroying the console and starting a small fire. One sailor in the compartment at the time of the strike received fragment wounds to the left forearm and left side of the torso. He survived. The Phalanx had saved the ship. It had not entirely neutralized the threat. Commander Walsh had approximately 90 seconds to make the next sequence of decisions before the C-14 could reload or maneuver to a second launch position. The C-14 was at 4,600 meters, still moving at reduced speed. The Mk-38's warning shots, and subsequently the fire-to-destroy order, had not yet connected before the missile launch. The chain gun was now free to engage the boat directly. At 7:41:03, the Mk-38 opened sustained fire on the C-14 at 4,400 meters. The first burst hit the boat's hull on the forward quarter. The boat slowed. The second burst struck the engine compartment. The C-14 lost propulsion at 7:41:17 and began drifting. The crew, 3 persons had been visible in imagery from the ship's surveillance camera, abandoned the boat at 7:41:29. They entered the water. The C-14 began burning from the engine fire and sank at 7:44:11 seconds. 3 Iranian sailors were in the water, approximately 4,200 meters off USS Farragut's port side. Commander Walsh had a decision that had no comfortable answer. His ship had been fired on. One of his sailors was wounded. The boat that fired was destroyed. The crew of that boat were now survivors in the water in the Strait of Hormuz, in one of the busiest shipping lanes in the world. Under international maritime law, the obligation to rescue persons in distress at sea applies regardless of who those persons are or what they have done. Walsh ordered the recovery operation at 7:45 a.m. The ship's rigid inflatable boat was in the water at 7:47 a.m. All 3 Iranian sailors were recovered by 7:53 a.m. 2 were uninjured. One had a broken arm, apparently sustained when he abandoned the C-14 as it burned. They were brought aboard USS Farragut and transferred to the ship's medical facility. They were held as personnel recovered at sea pending transfer to 5th Fleet for handling. At 8:02 a.m., simultaneously with the survivor recovery, 5th Fleet authorized a strike on the C-14's operating base. Intelligence had assessed the boat's launch point as a small IRGCN fast boat facility on the Iranian coastline near Qeshm Island, approximately 31 nautical miles north of the engagement position. Two FA-18C Hornets from VFA 192, the Golden Dragons, operating from USS Carl Vinson, were already on a combat air patrol when the tasking came through at 8:06 a.m. The flight lead, callsign King 1, acknowledged the coordinates at 8:08 a.m. His loadout included 2 GBU, 32 JDAM 1,000-pound bombs and 2 AIM-9X Sidewinders. At 8:11 a.m., King 1 queried 5th Fleet on a complication. Commercial satellite imagery from a private provider, Novasar, showed what appeared to be 2 civilian fishing vessels moored at the fast boat facility as of 6:45 a.m. local time. The imagery was 94 minutes old. The vessels may or may not still be present. 5th Fleet acknowledged the query and requested a current visual pass before weapons release. King 1 descended to 8,000 feet and conducted an overpass of the facility at 8:17 a.m. His targeting pod showed the facility clearly. The 2 fishing vessels visible in the satellite imagery were still present. One moored at the dock, one anchored approximately 200 meters offshore. The strike was authorized with adjusted aim points. The 2 GBU-32s were targeted at the concrete launch ramp and the boat maintenance shed rather than the dock area, minimizing collateral risk to the fishing vessels while destroying the facility's operational capability. King 1 impact at 8:20 and 9 seconds. Post-strike assessment by targeting pod footage and subsequent satellite imagery confirmed both GBU-32s on target. The launch ramp was destroyed. The maintenance shed was destroyed. The dock infrastructure sustained partial damage from secondary effects. Neither fishing vessel was directly struck. The nearer one sustained some blast damage to its superstructure but was not sunk. The IRGCN fastboat facility at Qeshm was assessed as non-operational. The 3 Iranian sailors recovered from the water were transferred to a 5th Fleet patrol vessel at 14:30 p.m. that afternoon. They were treated for their injuries and subsequently released to Iranian authorities through a third-party channel 11 days later, in an exchange process that involved no public acknowledgement from either government. No journalist asked about the 3 sailors publicly for 9 days. When the question was eventually raised in a press briefing, the Pentagon spokesperson confirmed that 3 individuals had been recovered from the water and treated for injuries. He declined to specify their nationality on the grounds that the transfer process was ongoing. The injured American sailor, the one with the forearm and torso fragment wounds, was treated in USS Farragut's medical facility and stabilized for medevac to the U.S. Naval Hospital at Bahrain. He was listed in stable condition. He requested to remain aboard the ship. Commander Walsh denied the request on medical grounds and transferred him to Bahrain. The sailor was back on active duty in 22 days. The electronics console that had been destroyed by the fragment was replaced during a brief Bahrain port call. The fire in the equipment compartment had been fully extinguished within 4 minutes of the fragment strike. The ship's damage control teams had been at their stations and had begun suppression before the Phalanx had finished firing. USS Farragut returned to patrol in the eastern Hormuz approach 6 days after the engagement. There is a detail from the post-engagement intelligence review that captures something important about the strategic picture behind this tactical incident. The C-14 missile boat had been tracked by a commercial satellite imagery provider during its transit from its home base to the area where it hid in the container ship's radar shadow. The imagery showed the boat departing Qeshm at approximately 4:15 a.m., 3 hours and 26 minutes before the engagement. That imagery had been purchased by a defense analysis organization and published on an open-source military website at 6:40 a.m., 1 hour before the engagement. 5th Fleet had not seen the publication before the engagement began. One analyst at a think tank in Washington had seen it. He had flagged it in a post on his organization's website at 6:52 a.m. His post noted the C-14's unusual departure time and eastward track and described it as worth watching. Nobody with operational authority to warn USS Farragut was monitoring that website at 7:08 a.m. when the destroyer entered the eastern approach corridor. The gap between open-source intelligence and operational warning systems is a known problem. It has been a known problem for years. It will continue to be a known problem until the organizational architecture that separates commercial imagery analysis from real-time tactical warning is changed. It has not been changed yet. The eastern approach to the Strait of Hormuz has 14 commercial vessels in it at any given hour of the day. It has IRGCN fastboats that look like fishing craft until they accelerate to 36 knots. It has radar shadows behind container ships that are just wide enough to hide a C-14. The Phalanx CIWS on USS Farragut is designed for threats inside 1,500 meters. The C-801 fired that morning reached 750 meters before it was stopped. The system worked within its design envelope. There is a broader lesson embedded in this engagement that deserves more attention than it typically receives in post-incident tactical reviews. The C-14 missile boat had been at sea for 3 hours and 26 minutes before it fired. It had traveled from its base, transited the western portion of the strait, inserted itself into the radar shadow of a container ship, and followed USS Farragut for 22 minutes before it accelerated to engage. The entire operation, from departure to launch, had been methodical, patient, and tactically sophisticated. This is not the profile of an impulsive harassment operation. The IRGCN did not improvise the container ship radar shadow tactic. It was identified as a viable concealment method through systematic study of American destroyer radar performance in the Hormuz commercial traffic environment. The C-14's 23-meter hull and low freeboard produce a radar cross-section that, from specific aspect angles and at distances above 3,000 meters, is difficult to distinguish from ambient radar clutter generated by wave action and small craft. The container ship's radar shadow compounded this natural concealment by placing the C-14 in a zone of reduced radar energy return from Farragut's AN/SPY-1D array. The IRGCN had identified this vulnerability and built an operational doctrine around it. The 5-minute and 45-second delay between the C-14's first anomalous behavior and USS Farragut's General Quarters order had not been a failure of the watch officer. It had been the natural result of encountering a threat that was specifically designed to appear non-threatening for as long as possible. The ambiguity the watch officer faced was not accidental. It was engineered. The ROE threshold, warning shots at 4,500 meters, fire to destroy at 3,500 meters, was designed to protect commercial vessels from being fired on by American warships due to misidentification. In the Hormuz commercial traffic environment, this threshold is operationally necessary. In the context of a C-14 approaching at 36 knots, that threshold gives the missile boat approximately 35 seconds of warning shot window before the destroyer can lawfully engage to destroy. The C-14 did not wait for the warning shot window to expire. It fired at 4,800 meters, 300 meters before the warning shot threshold. That is not improvisation. That is a carefully engineered engagement envelope designed specifically to exploit American rules of engagement in the Hormuz corridor. Fifth Fleet's review of this engagement concluded that the warning shot threshold needed to be revised for high-speed small craft in the eastern Hormuz approach. The revision was implemented within 30 days. The new threshold placed the fire-to-destroy authorization at 6,000 meters for any contact classified as a probable military vessel on a direct intercept course at speeds above 25 knots. The change increased the defensive window from 35 seconds to approximately 72 seconds for a C-14 class threat. It also increased the risk of a commercially damaging misidentification incident. A fishing boat moving at 25 knots toward a destroyer is unusual but not impossible. The Oman coastline generates commercial fast craft traffic that occasionally produces those contact profiles. There is no perfect threshold. There is only the last threshold before someone gets killed, and the next one after they do. The U.S. sailor who was wounded by the fragment from the partially detonated C-801 warhead returned to duty in 22 days. He filed a detailed account of his experience in the electronics compartment at the time of the strike for the Navy Safety Center's Operational Lessons Program. He described the sound of the fragment entering the compartment as arriving before the detonation noise did, which is consistent with the physics of a fragment traveling faster than the sound wave from the deflagration. He said it sounded like a knock on a metal door. He had turned toward the door when the fragment hit him. Turning away would not have helped, but he noted it in his account anyway. USS Farragut is still patrolling the eastern Hormuz approach. The Phalanx CIWS is operational, calibrated, and ready. The Mk-38 has been fully restocked. The electronics compartment has a new console. The eastern approach has the same 14 commercial vessels at any given hour. The same radar shadows behind the same container ships. The same fishing boats that look like fast attack craft until they don't. And the fast attack craft that look like fishing boats until they fire. The next C-14 is already somewhere in the strait. Stay vigilant. Stay informed. See you in the next one.